right? And I'm having this conversation about queerness and occupying spaces as political beings. In the previous episode, we dealt with identity crisis, and to be more specific, we dealt with the uniqueness of a queer identity crisis. So naturally progressing into this week, what we are going to be dealing with is a crisis of faith and how it is experienced by the queer community, which is the LGBTQ plus. But before I go to that, I'd just like for you guys to like, share, and subscribe to the YouTube channel and just interact with the content on the comment section, please, so that I could be able to get like a little bit of feedback from you guys in terms of what you think. My name is Mufimani Khape, and this is Gays, Freedom, and the Right to Exist. So yeah, I'm just going to try and keep this particular episode short because I think this particular topic that I'm touching on is a bit concise and straight to the point, especially because it picks up on already on other topics that I've already dealt with in previous episodes. It kind of piggybags on those topics, right? So with the help of the previous episodes, I think it would be easy for me to just go through this episode in a straight and concise manner. That's just like so that we can keep the episode short. Yeah. So without any waste of time, I'm gonna go into it. What I'm going to be touching on is a crisis of faith, and essentially what a crisis of faith is about in this case. It's just about understanding the extent to which the queer community in and of itself, right, experiences a point in their life where they experience a huge deal of confusion and extreme questioning of their own faith, especially because they question the dogma that subsequently follows the belief system that they have chosen to fall part of, or rather that they have been raised into. But before we go into all of that, what I want us to do is to just understand exactly what faith is. And for us to be able to do this, like just to define faith, really, the nice thing about language is that we use words to explain words. So literally we just give synonyms of what something, to just explain what something could mean. So we use synonyms as an example. But in this case, right, what faith encompasses really is confidence and trust and belief in something or someone or doctrine and teachings that have been provided to a person over time. Contrary to popular belief, faith, I believe, is something that is taught. And what do I mean by that? So what I mean is that we are not born into specific faiths, right? When a child is born, they have no faith, they don't believe in anything, right? They are just a human being where the world withholds a huge deal of potential and they can become themselves within that world. But as they grow into who they become, right? They learn from the people who are around them. So what that means, everyone who's around a child and everyone who's around any individual who has no access to knowledge has the capacity and capability, or rather has the privilege of being able to guide that individual in terms of what that person will believe in the future. So faith operates in the same way. So the truth about this, contrary to popular belief, is that the truth about the material value of faith is a very subjective conversation. And what do I mean by this? So what I mean by this is that there is no objective truth, especially because the bulk of the human race does not believe in the same thing. We all believe in different things because we all come from different walks of life. As a result, we have all gotten to learn different lessons and different things from life itself and from all the other lessons that we have gotten out of life. So essentially, the other thing about faith that proves that the material value is quite subjective stems from the fact that one, human beings have different degrees of faith. So our belief and our faith in certain doctrine or teaching or something or someone often is not the same. So you'd find that people who believe in God do not believe in God in equal levels. We have devout Christians who believe God or nothing, who believe it's God or nothing. We have the more liberal people within the Christian community who their degree of acceptance of certain things about God is centered around this whole idea that they themselves are autonomous human beings, and their ability to be able to fully believe requires that they autonomously select that. We have people who just believe that dogma and doctrine is something that is given to them by a pious God, right? And secondly, there is different applications of, most of the time, the same type of faith or religion. And in this case, what I want to say is that you find that even people who believe in God apply themselves differently, even when they say the application thereof is said to bear similar fruits. The third thing is we all have different expectations of what faith should be able to produce for us. So if we believe in something, one person could believe in God so that because they believe that if they believe in God, they will prosper. But another person just believes it's all a game of spiritual fulfillment. Another person doesn't believe at all. So we also have different expectations of what the material value of faith is. As a result, I think that as a minor premise can propagate the major premise that the material value of faith and the truth about it is quite subjective to the individual who, or rather the individual in question. And the other thing is the multiplicity of comprehension. So what do I mean by this? People come to a point where they begin to interrogate their own ideas because the world has a multiplicity of comprehension in terms of faith. The way in which we understand what we believe in is all different. Now, you can imagine if I have always understood God and my faith in God to be in this way, and then I interact with someone else who also believes in God, but their faith, their understanding of their faith in God is different. Their comprehension of what and who God is and what the material value of a God is different from what I am. Then I begin as a human being who is critical of life, and I begin to interrogate my own understanding, because at that point then I am faced with the question of whether or not if what I have grown to believe and understand and accept is right or not. Now, I just want you for a second to use your imagination and just imagine this. Oftentimes, right, in particularly the Catholic community, a child is born and just soon after that, the child is baptized. Right. And the teaching about baptism in the Catholic context, or rather, it would be interesting that we have somebody who has a different understanding, because this has been my understanding for a very long time, is that when you go and baptize a child, you do not commit that child into Christianity. But what you do is that you commit yourself to raise that child in Christian values and Christian principles and Christian dogma and doctrine, right? So that commitment in and of itself is one that is specific to a person who is going to be raising this child. What this then proves is that the lessons that are going to be learned by this child around faith are going to be adopted from the person who has committed themselves to be the teacher. This is true for everyone else, right? Even if people are not necessarily baptized. Every family, what it does is that it's got teachings that it gives to their own children about life, and then when they grow up, when those children grow up, decipher the knowledge that they have. The trick is, though, your knowledge pool is specific to what you have been taught. So what this means is that even in a world where you reject God, your vantage point as a Christian, as a child who was raised in a Christian family, your vantage point is from a Christian perspective. Your rejection of God stems from the teachings and the understandings that you were given about God, and your knowledge pool is limited easily to that, or is predominantly preoccupied with that. So essentially, the teachings that we get about faith stem from different parts of our lives and different walks of lives that we have experienced. You find that a child can learn about faith from their home, right, which predominantly is lessons from their parents who got their teachings from their own parents, and. Secondly, we also have things like faith-based institutions. So you find that when you grow up and you are ready to hit the streets, and maybe we can take you to church or to school or to different organizations, oftentimes all of these institutions have adopted a certain faith. And if they have adopted a certain faith, then they teach you that type of faith. But beyond that, then there is a society. Now you begin to notice every time as your horizon grows and your knowledge pool and and the pool of knowledge that you are taking your knowledge from, as it grows, the differences in understanding keeps on getting multiplied, right? Because firstly, it's more minds, more individuals who understand that, and just more ideas that are coming up from that. As a result of this, oftentimes, as far as faith is concerned, we can never agree on the same thing. And because we can never agree on the same, perhaps maybe let me explain this idea first. The whole idea of us never agreeing on the same thing, right, stems from the fact that human beings have their own minds, and everyone who has their own mind and a brain, right, has their own understanding of things, and we all bring in our different understandings, and oftentimes, because I am using my own experiences and all the other lessons, that the prior lessons that I've learned before this point of conversation, then my understanding of that is influenced by different experiences from the other person that I could be having this conversation with. As a result, we then do not fully agree. So even if we agree on something, our understanding is not entirely the same. Our interpretation will not always be the same, and our translation of that conversation will not always be the same. This results in something that I would refer to as a conflict of ideas within institutions that are supposed to teach us about a faith that we are supposed to grow into. And oftentimes it happens in two levels, right? So you have interfaith conflict, where people who come from completely different faith-based institutions do not share the same ideology, but it can also microscopically become deeper into the internal organization that one comes from, and then we tend to experience intra faith conflict of ideas, because even in the same faith, people don't always share the same understanding of that idea. Now, because of this, human beings are always faced with, at some point in their life, with a world where they have to experience some type of confusion because of the multiplicity of ideas that they come across as they grow up and they experience different walks of lives and different types of people. Not only do they experience a bit of confusion, but they begin to question their own understanding. And this is what may result in a crisis of faith. The common conception of this idea is we all have a reliance on our own conviction. Right? And what do I mean by that? My understanding of a certain topic and my understanding of a certain idea relies on my own convictions firstly, but my own experience and my own the teachings that I've also experienced, right? But also then the interpretation is something that is internal to me. And even when I get to the point where I have to do that assessment and choose whether or not if this is something that I want to go into or not, right? It's an exercise that I find myself having to do alone. And after doing that assessment alone, right, I come back with my own reasons as to why I made the choice that I did, and it can result in like conflicting ideas, right? This is why you find that people believe in the same thing for different reasons, and we just exercise, we just do the analytical, we are just, because we human beings, we do the analytical exercise where the funny thing is this exercise is not one that can be done like to a point where we say, okay, cool, we are done understanding faith, or we are done understanding the world, because the world is infinite. It keeps on going, even from the beginning. So we don't have knowledge of time immemorial, right? Now, the true crisis of faith stems from the question of why people have faith even in the first place, but secondly, it also stems from the way in which faith is applied in the world, and thirdly, what the crisis is at the end of the day, right? So if you think about it in this way, you ask the question, why is it that people have faith? I personally believe that people have faith because it provides them with a sense of purpose and a sense of duty. And both these two concepts, purpose and duty, right, they propagate an individual into a certain responsibility on earth. So we have this question, internal question as human beings, that it has been asked from time immemorial about why exactly were we born. And our faith tends to attempt to answer that. Whoever you believe in answers it in their own way. For example, for Christians, right, the Bible has its way of responding to that. And for those who believe in African spirituality and have faith in that, the doctrine has its way of responding to that, and all these other religions, traditions, and cultural practices that people find themselves having faith in. Secondly, faith tends to provide easy guidance in terms of how we live our life and how we practice what being an actual human being is supposed to be like, in terms, and what our role is in terms of the society. Now, if you think about this in terms of how all this education is applied, or rather the dogma is passed down from one generation to another. The first would be indoctrination. And I know indoctrination sounds very controversial as a word to use, but merely what indoctrination is about is passing the knowledge and information onto other people and asking them to accept it, which leads then to the second part of application, which is acceptance, right? Because People can give you the knowledge about a specific faith. The acceptance of that faith is solely dependent on you. Even in a world where you are beat up, right? You are beat up to submission to that faith. You can choose that I'd rather die than believe in it. And if you make a choice to accept that, perhaps the indoctrination was hard enough. Thirdly, it's internalization. And what do I mean by that? Once you've accepted a certain faith, then you begin to internalize the practices of that faith, which then results in the actual crisis. Because also, remember, earlier on I spoke about a crisis of faith being brought up by a confusion and questioning of decades and generations of knowledge that has been passed down from one generation to another, right? And when it gets to you, you begin to question it as well. The people who came before you questioned it, and those who came before them questioned it as well. And those who are going to come after are still going to question it. Now, the interesting thing for queer people specifically in this case is the awakening that the practice within the faiths that we have opted into, or rather faiths that are available on earth, do not align with queerness, right? There is a predominant rejection of the queer community by the dogma that we are taught within these faith-based institutions and by our parents and all of that. Now, you find that even in a world where somebody likes you, if they believe in the Bible, most of the time, right, if they believe the Bible is the word of God and everything that's in the Bible settles it, they also accept the parts of the Bible that are anti-gay and are anti-homosexual. As a result, having internalized that dogma, you find yourself questioning your own identity as a queer man, right? Which accentuates the crisis of faith that you have. Because then you can imagine if I am this type of person and the religion that I've internalized, or the doctrine that I've internalized as a result of my faith, rejects my identity, then I would question firstly myself and my own identity and the validity of my identity. But secondly, I would question the faith in and of itself, right? That's where the crisis of faith stems about, where there's a conflict in terms of the faith and the identity of a person, and especially for the purposes of this episode, queer identity. And as both of those things happen, right, you find yourself questioning on both sides and both angles. Now, because of how we were all taught, harmony kind of requires that we give the majority of society the right to define history. Oftentimes, and you'll understand why this is important as I go on, right? Oftentimes there's this idea that there has never been gay people in Africa before colonization, which is firstly a lie, because that cannot be an argument that is made conclusively about people whom who are not here to account for themselves first. The only thing is, we do not have a record of those people, but we don't have a record of a lot of other things on earth. We just don't assume that it's true, they never existed. And because harmony requires that, world utility, on the other hand, the world utility of the queer crisis of faith is accepting the dogma and existing in that kind of society. And I'm gonna tell you a story, right? I have a few friends who are devout Christians, and one of them I engaged with them on this conversation of conversation of homosexuality and what their own stance is, and so the question that I was asking is, okay, cool, first and foremost, you believe and you have faith in God, but secondly, as a result, have you internalized what's written in the Bible? Is it something that you believe in? And they were like, yeah, the Bible is something that I believe in. Now, immediately they said the Bible is something that I believed in. Then I also further questioned everything in the Bible. Like, yeah. So I asked, what about the scriptures that speak anti-gay? They said, you know what? I love gay people and I have friends who are gay, which is a very common thing for Christian people when they try to sort of downplay queerness. Like, you know, you can do you and be you because I accept that people can be who they are. The only thing is, for me, I still accept that queerness is a sin based on the Bible. Then my chat was, but then if you believe that queerness is a sin and a sin is something that is grotesque, that is ought not to be accepted, you don't accept, align, or agree with queerness, right? So you tolerate to a certain extent my existence, but you don't accept it. Now, when this tape keeps on playing itself, where society keeps on rejecting you on the basis of a faith that you also probably believe in. Am I suggesting that I believe in something? This is not to suggest that I believe in anything. But anyone who believes, if every time an institution that you believe in rejects your identity, you experience a great deal of confusion and questioning of that faith and also of yourself, right? Now, what we see queer people doing mostly, who are subscribed to faiths that reject them, is this interesting thing, or rather intriguing thing, of separating biological identity, or rather just identity, and faith, right? So the person kind of has a double life existence where on one end they have faith and they accept certain parts of that faith, and on the other hand they are of this identity and they are not willing to let go of that identity, and they somewhat believe that the two can coexist in one life. And the interesting thing about that is that if the two can coexist in one life, it also then requires that you accept that all the moments when you are gay, you are anti the dogma that you believe in. You are anti a God that you believe in, who's in the Bible, right? Now, you also then have to accept that the interesting thing is these people who are questioning themselves, they're not the only people who are questioning themselves. We are also experiencing a society that is questioning them, right? Now, all of these things are playing in your head. The voices that your own voices, but the voices of the rest of society interrogating the decisions that you're making around faith and identity, and the conflict that exists between your life and the faith that you have chosen. This easily results in a crisis of faith. My argument is oftentimes no one has an answer to these questions. Hence, the application is subject to an individual. And you find people redefining faith for themselves so that it can suit their own lifestyle, which is then interesting because how inherent is the truth about faith if it can be chopped and changed based on an individual's convenience and ability to live? And that's the question that I'm going to leave you with. Please like, share, comment, and interact with the content on the comment section. This is Gaze, Freedom, and the Right to Be. My name is Musimane Khabe.